And so here's what they do. They come to King Darius and they say, we think that it would be a good idea for the next 30 days that no one pray to any other god or mortal except you, O great king. And they kind of do that bowing and scraping thing. Well, who could turn that down? And King Darius said, that sounds good to me. Where's the pen and where do I sign? And he signed the decree. Now, church, put yourself right now in Daniel's shoes here. The king, whose authority you're under, says the only person that you can pray to is him, and if you pray to anyone other than him, he says that he'll throw you in a den of lions. So here comes Daniel, smack dab into another strategic inflection point, and he has to choose, do I obey God and live out a life of conviction, or do I disobey God and give in to compromise? Check out what Daniel does. Daniel 6:10. When Daniel learned that the decree had been signed and posted, he continued to pray and practice unbreakable obedience to God, just as he had always done, because he was a man of unbreakable character and conviction. Now, I thought about this, and I think a lot of us would have continued to pray, but we would have gone deep within our prayer closets to pray. You know what I'm talking about? But not Daniel. Listen to what happens and what it says next. His house, Daniel's house, had big windows in the upstairs that opened towards Jerusalem. Jerusalem was in Judea, the land that God had given the children of Israel, and Jerusalem was his chosen city, and the temple of God had been built there. So 3 times a day, Daniel faces towards Jerusalem. He knelt there in prayer, thanking and praising his God. Of course, his conspirators were spying on him, and when they saw him praying, they said to themselves, now we've got him, and they ran and told the king. But here's what's awesome about this story. The king liked Daniel so much that he tried to change the law and figure out a way to get Daniel out of this mess. But there was no way out. And so the king ordered Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den. But he said to him, listen to what the king said. He said, your God to whom you are so loyal, your God that you serve with unbreakable obedience and conviction, Daniel, he is going to get you out of this. Isn't that amazing? The king says to Daniel, because you are a man who chooses to suffer without compromise, because you are so tight with this God of yours, he can't help but notice the life of conviction that you are living. And he is going to get you out of this mess. That amazes me. So they threw Daniel into the lion's den, but Daniel wasn't the one who was upset that night. King Darius was the one who was upset because he refused to eat and he couldn't sleep, so he spent the night fasting. I wonder who he was praying to. Let's pick it up at verse 19. This is a cool story. At daybreak, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. As he approached it, he called out anxiously, Daniel, servant of the living God, has the God whom you serve so loyally saved you from the lions? And out of the lion's den, the king hears Daniel's voice, loud and strong, and he answers the king by saying, O king, live forever. My God sent his angels who closed the mouths of the lions so that they would not hurt me. I have been found innocent before God and also before you, O king. Verse 23, when the king heard these words, he shouted, Yea, God! He was happy. He ordered Daniel taken up out of the den. When he was hauled up, there wasn't a scratch on him. He had trusted his God. We read this story, and we are all inspired to become men and women who practice unbreakable obedience to God in our suffering so that we can become unbreakable in our character and in our conviction. But let me remind you about something here. Here's what's so cool about this story again. Daniel is not the hero. Because after he comes up out of the lion's den, King Darius exalts the God of heaven, not Daniel. And he declares that the God of heaven is a Savior, and he is a rescuer, and he is the one to be worshipped in the land of Babylon. Daniel lived without unbreakable. Daniel lived without compromise in his suffering because his convictions were grounded in his covenant relationship with God. That's what made Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that's what made them unbreakable. So, bring the story all the way up now, the life lesson all the way up to today, and we have to ask ourselves this question. How do we live like this? How do we learn to suffer without compromise? How do we hold so tightly on to our convictions that at the end of our suffering, God is glorified? How do we apply this to our life? Here's how. We can learn to suffer without compromise because our convictions aren't based on our circumstances, but in a covenant relationship. So are you ready for this? This is awesome. So our focus in suffering is not what we believe in, but who we belong to.
Amen.
When God gave me that, I had to come out here and run around the church a couple times and shout. Our focus in suffering is not what we believe in, but who we belong to. Remember everything I said about covenant relationship? Ooh, that's a strong belonging. You see, church, follow me. This is going to help some of you. I think the reason why we struggle so much with our suffering is because we get focused on why rather than the who. And we get focused on the cerebral rather than the personal. And we get focused on the philosophical rather than the relational. But our focus in suffering should not be what we believe in, but who we belong to. Listen to what Eugene Peterson writes about this story. He is the translator, paraphraser of the Message Bible. I love what he says. He says, Daniel in the lion's den holds a central place in the Christian memory. We know that there is no danger that a person of faith cannot survive. And we know that those who are obedient to God have nothing to fear either from human cruelty or animal brutality. The Lord is able to shut the mouths of whatever lions have surrounded us. Right now, put in your mind the picture of the lions that have surrounded you. The Lord is able to shut the mouths of whatever lions have surrounded us. And he is also able to lift whatever stone slab seals our fate. Check this out. But our hope isn't in our rescue. It's in our belonging to the rescuer. For whether we live or die, we are the Lord's.
Amen.
Why? Because we have a covenant relationship with him. Here's what I want us to take away from this Unbreakable series. We are all going to suffer, but as believers, knowing who we belong to is far more important than knowing what we believe in.